She never expected kindness from a stranger after the worst day of her life. What happened next changed everything. Stay until the end to see how a moment of embarrassment turned into a lifetime of love. If this story touches your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that remind us of the power of compassion and second chances. Emma clutched her phone, staring at the time as rain pelted her windshield. She was already 15 minutes late for her blind date, and now this, a flat tire on a muddy back road with no cell service. The universe clearly had it out for her today. She'd promised her best friend Lily she would give dating another chance after her devastating breakup 6 months ago. Now she was stranded in the middle of nowhere, her cute new dress already splattered with mud as she'd attempted to assess the damage to her tire. After 20 minutes of struggling with the spare, Emma was drenched, filthy, and fighting back tears. Her hands were raw and bleeding slightly where she'd scraped them on the pavement. The spare tire was finally on, but she looked like she'd been wrestling in a mud pit. There was no way she could show up to meet this stranger, this single dad named Jack that Lily had been raving about for weeks, looking like this. But she had no choice. She couldn't just not show up without explanation. The drive to the restaurant took another 15 minutes. By the time Emma pulled into the parking lot, she was 45 minutes late. She caught her reflection in the rearview mirror and winced. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her carefully curled hair now hung in wet strands, and her pale blue dress was stained beyond salvation with streaks of brown mud. She looked like she'd been through a war zone. Just go home, she whispered to herself. But something, maybe it was Lily's voice in her head insisting this guy was different, made her gather what little dignity she had left and step out of the car. The hostess at the upscale Italian restaurant gave her a horrified once-over as Emma approached the podium. "I'm meeting someone," Emma said quietly. "Reservation under Jack Pearson?" The hostess's expression softened slightly. "He's still here. Been waiting almost an hour. Table by the window." Emma's heart sank as she spotted him, tall, with kind eyes and broad shoulders, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt. He was absently checking his watch, a half-empty glass of wine in front of him. He looked exactly like the photo Lily had shown her, but somehow more handsome in person. And here she was, looking like she'd crawled out of a swamp. She considered turning around and running, but he looked up at that exact moment and their eyes met. Emma froze, mortified, as his eyes widened in surprise. Jack stood up immediately, concern washing over his face as he approached her. "Emma?" he asked gently. "I'm so sorry," she blurted out, tears threatening to spill over. "I had a flat tire on that dirt road off Highway 16, and there was no cell service, and I tried to change it myself but," she gestured helplessly at her appearance. What happened next would replay in Emma's mind for years to come. Instead of making an excuse to leave or looking embarrassed to be seen with her, Jack's face broke into a warm smile. He shrugged off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" he asked, noticing her scraped hands. Emma shook her head, too stunned to speak. "Let me guess," Jack said with a gentle smile. "You were debating whether to just go home and pretend this never happened?" Emma nodded, feeling the tension in her shoulders begin to ease slightly. "I'm glad you didn't," he said simply. Then he turned to the hostess who was watching the exchange with undisguised interest. "Could we get our food to go instead? And maybe a first aid kit if you have one?" 20 minutes later, they were sitting in Jack's truck in the parking lot, eating pasta from takeout containers while the heater blasted warm air. He'd cleaned and bandaged her scraped hands with surprising tenderness, explaining that raising an 8-year-old boy solo had made him an expert at minor injuries. "I'm still mortified," Emma admitted, looking down at her mud-stained dress. "Don't be," Jack said. "My daughter Sophie, she's 6, came home looking worse than this just last week. Apparently, mud pies are very in this season." His eyes crinkled when he smiled, and Emma felt something shift inside her chest. "You have 2 kids?" she asked. Jack nodded. Sophie and Max. They're everything to me. There was no hesitation, no apology in his voice, just pure love. Their mom left when Sophie was just a baby. Said parenthood wasn't what she signed up for. Emma felt a pang of sympathy. That must have been hard. Hardest thing I've ever been through, Jack admitted. But also the best thing, in a way. It made me realize what I'm made of. He took a bite of his pasta. So, Lily tells me you're a kindergarten teacher? And just like that, they fell into conversation as easily as old friends. Emma forgot about her ruined dress and mud-streaked face as Jack told her stories about his construction business and his kids' latest adventures. He listened intently as she shared her passion for teaching and her dream of opening a bookstore someday. There was something about his presence that made her feel safe, seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. When they finally noticed the time, 3 hours had passed. I should get home to relieve my babysitter, Jack said reluctantly. Of course, Emma said, suddenly remembering her appearance and feeling self-conscious again. Jack walked her to her car, and in the glow of the parking lot lights, he looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I'd really like to see you again, Emma. Preferably without the automotive disasters, but I'll take you any way I can get you. Emma laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. I'd like that too. As she drove home that night, Emma couldn't stop smiling. She'd shown up to a first date in the worst possible condition, and instead of judgment, she'd found kindness. Instead of embarrassment, she'd found connection. Maybe, just maybe, the universe hadn't been out to get her after all. What Emma didn't know then was that Jack had texted Lily the moment she'd walked into the restaurant, "She's perfect. Even covered in mud." Their second date was at a casual pizza place with Jack's kids in tow, his idea. Emma had been nervous about meeting them so soon, but Jack had been straightforward. They're the biggest part of my life. If this is going somewhere, and I hope it is, they need to be part of it from the beginning. Max, the 8-year-old, was reserved at first, studying Emma with serious eyes that reminded her so much of his father. But when she mentioned her collection of dinosaur fossils from her college archaeology course, his face lit up. "You have real dinosaur bones?" he asked incredulously. "Small ones," Emma clarified with a smile. "But yes, real ones. You can come see them sometime if your dad says it's okay." Sophie, on the other hand, took to Emma immediately, climbing into her lap halfway through dinner and declaring, "Your hair is pretty. Can I have braids like yours?" Jack watched the interactions with a mixture of joy and caution. He'd been burned before, introducing women to his children only to have them disappear when they realized the full reality of dating a single dad. But something about Emma felt different. The way she engaged with his kids, not trying too hard, not ignoring them either, just natural and genuine. As weeks turned into months, Emma became a fixture in their lives. She helped Max with his science projects, taught Sophie how to braid her own hair, and brought homemade cookies to Jack's construction sites. Jack, in turn, hung shelves in her apartment, fixed her perpetually problematic car, and listened to her dreams with the kind of attention that made her feel like anything was possible. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were arguments, about schedules, about boundaries, about the ghost of Jack's ex-wife who sometimes seemed to hover between them. There were moments when Emma questioned whether she was ready to be an instant mother to 2 children who still sometimes asked when their real mom was coming back. 6 months into their relationship, they hit their first major crisis. Jack's ex-wife suddenly reappeared, claiming she wanted to be part of the children's lives again. Emma watched as Jack struggled with anger, confusion, and the desire to protect his kids from more abandonment. "Maybe I should step back," Emma suggested one night after the kids were in bed, her heart breaking even as she said the words. "Give you space to figure this out as a family." Jack looked at her with those steady eyes that had first captured her attention on that mud-soaked night. "You are our family now," he said firmly. "The kids need stability, not confusion. They need you, I need you." That night, As they sat on his porch swing watching the stars, Jack took her hand. "You know, when you walked into that restaurant covered in mud, I knew." "Knew what?" Emma asked. "That you were real. That you weren't afraid to show up, even when things weren't perfect." He squeezed her hand. "I'd spent 2 years dating women who seemed perfect on the surface but disappeared at the first sign of difficulty. And then there you were, a mess, apologizing, but still there. Still showing up." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, remembering how close she'd come to driving away that night. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But you did," Jack said simply. "And that's what matters." The situation with Jack's ex-wife resolved itself when she realized that parenting required actual work and commitment. After a few sporadic visits, she disappeared from their lives again, leaving Jack to pick up the emotional pieces for his children once more. But this time, he wasn't doing it alone. Emma was there, steady and patient, helping the children understand that some people weren't capable of the kind of love they deserved, but that didn't mean they weren't worthy of love. On the 1-year anniversary of their first date, Jack took Emma back to the same Italian restaurant. This time, she wore a new dress, deep green that brought out her eyes, and arrived early, no automotive disasters in sight. Jack seemed nervous, fidgeting with his napkin and checking his pocket repeatedly. "Is everything okay?" Emma asked, reaching across the table to touch his hand. Jack took a deep breath. "I had this whole speech planned," he said with a self-deprecating smile. "About how you changed our lives, about how the kids can't imagine life without you now, about how I've never felt this way about anyone." Emma's heart began to race as Jack stood up and then, to her astonishment, knelt beside the table. The restaurant fell silent as other diners realized what was happening. "But the truth is simpler than all that," Jack continued, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "I love you, Emma. The kids love you. We want you to be part of our family officially." He opened the box to reveal a vintage sapphire ring. "Will you marry me?" Through tears, Emma nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then she found her voice. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." The restaurant erupted in applause as Jack slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her. But the real celebration came later, when they told the children. Sophie squealed with delight and immediately began planning her flower girl dress, while Max, in his serious way, asked, "Does this mean we can call you Mom now?" Emma knelt down to his level, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," she said gently. "But I would be honored to be your mom in every way that matters." Max studied her face for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "Mom," he said, testing the word. Then he threw his arms around her neck in a rare display of physical affection that made Emma's eyes fill with tears all over again. They were married 6 months later in a simple ceremony in Jack's backyard. Emma wore a lace dress that Sophie had helped pick out, and Max proudly walked her down the aisle. Lily, who had set them up on that fateful blind date, served as maid of honor, wiping away tears as she watched her best friend find the happiness she deserved. During the reception, Jack pulled Emma aside for a moment of quiet amidst the celebration. "Remember when you showed up covered in mud?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. Emma groaned. "Are you ever going to let me live that down?" Jack laughed, pulling her close. "Never. It's my favorite story to tell." His expression grew serious. "You know, most people put on their best face at the beginning of a relationship. They try to hide all the messy parts until later. But we started with the mess, and look where we are now." Emma looked around at their blended family, at Sophie twirling in her flower girl dress, at Max carefully cutting his cake into precise squares, at their friends and family laughing and dancing. "I wouldn't change a thing," she said softly. 5 years later, Emma sat on the porch of their home, watching Jack play basketball with Max, now 13 and nearly as tall as his father. Sophie, 11 going on 20, was reading beside her, occasionally looking up to cheer when her brother scored. The newest addition to their family, 3-year-old Lily, named after the friend who had brought them together, was napping inside after a morning of helping Emma in the garden, which mostly meant getting covered in mud. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, teenage mood swings, work stress, the everyday complications of blending a family. But every night, when Jack pulled her close and whispered, "I love you," in the darkness, Emma was grateful for that rainy night, that flat tire, and the courage it had taken to walk into a restaurant covered in mud. Sometimes, she reflected, the messiest beginnings led to the most beautiful stories. And theirs was still being written, one imperfect, wonderful day at a time. As Jack looked over and caught her eye, smiling that same warm smile that had melted her heart on their first date, Emma knew with absolute certainty, showing up, even at your worst, was always better than not showing up at all. Because sometimes, the person waiting for you is exactly the one who will love you not despite your mess, but because of the courage it takes to show up anyway. And that was the greatest lesson of all, one she hoped to pass on to their children. That love wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. About showing up, mud and all, and finding someone who sees the beauty in your willingness to be real. In the end, that muddy disaster of a first date hadn't been a disaster at all. It had been the beginning of the most authentic love story Emma could have imagined, one that proved sometimes life's most beautiful moments come disguised as its most embarrassing ones.